There are three coding agents that everyone's talking about these days: Cursor, Windsurf, and Anthropic's latest attempt, Claude Code. Claude Code also runs in the terminal rather than being a VSCode clone like the other two. But the terminal interface aside, how well does Claude Code cope with building a full web app compared to Cursor and Windsurf? I was really curious to find that out, so I put them all to the test. I asked all three agents to build the exact same app with the same prompt. I wanted to see how they coped with different levels of difficulty. So I ran 3 different tests, each time making the app more and more complex. And the results? Well, let's find out. I've created 3 folders, one for Windsurf, one for Claude, and one for Cursor. For each folder, I've created a Next.js app with exactly the same settings. I've also written 3 prompts, one for each test, and we'll feed the exact same starting prompt to each agent, again, to make sure that we're starting with a fair comparison. So test number 1 is going to be to create a landing page for an AI-powered to-do list app. I'm going to ask each agent to create this landing page using the prompt, and I'm going to read out the prompt to you now. You're operating inside a fresh install of Next.js 15 with nothing yet implemented. I'd like you to create a landing page for an AI-powered to-do list/project management app similar to Linear or Jira. Our app has a Kanban board where you can create to-dos and move them between stages. The AI-powered aspect is that you can use AI to help you write the ticket's title and description. Come up with a name for this app and create a beautiful, modern, sleek landing page that communicates the value clearly. So let's give the same prompt to all 3 agents and let's watch them work. Let's see what they come up with. Okay, so Claude Code is going at it. Let's now put things into Windsurf as well. And then finally Cursor. Okay, so all 3 agents are going at it. So it's really interesting seeing all 3 of these agents at work. I would say Windsurf and Cursor are now quite similar, but Windsurf, it's a bit clearer when it's analyzing different files. It also doesn't expand the code it's generating by default, which makes the sidebar slightly cleaner. It's just a lot easier to see what's happening, whereas Cursor, you can see these code blocks coming in, and it's not as easy to see what files being changed just because of these code blocks kind of getting in the way. Okay, so we have all 3 of these landing pages complete, and they all look pretty good. So let's look at the quick differences. So on the left, we have Claude Code. Fluxus is the name of the app. We have a login and sign up button. Streamline your workflow with AI-powered project management. So we have a get started button, see how it works, which takes us to the how it works section. Trusted by productive teams, simple transparent pricing, team account with $12 per user per month. That seems reasonable. Okay, this looks really good, to be honest, for a first attempt especially. So let's move on to Windsurf. Windsurf's called it Taskflow AI. We have AI-powered project management made simple. It's very interesting how they've both used almost exactly the same shade of purple in the branding, which I wonder if it's just something to do with Claude 3.7 that it prefers this kind of color. Okay, so very similar things. Watch demo, which doesn't seem to do anything. We do have like a little mock-up of what the product might look like here, which is really cool, and some animations. Start free trial, schedule demo. So we've gone for more of a sales strategy here rather than an organic sign-up strategy, but looks reasonable. I would say I probably prefer Claude Code's design, but they're basically created by the same LLM, so it's just down to randomness at this point, I would say. Okay, so let's finally move on to Cursor. Task Genius. I have to say, I prefer this name over the other 2. So Task Genius transforms your workflow with AI-powered task management that thinks ahead and works with you. Again, we've got this same purple. I'm not sure where that purple is coming from. I like the gradients Cursor's added, which don't appear on the other 2. So I would say the first test, all 3 agents passed with flying colors. I didn't have to make any extra prompts, and they all kind of followed the brief. We could nitpick between the 3, like which one had the better design and stuff, but I think most of that is probably down to the randomness in the LLM generations rather than something to do with the agent's functionality. Now let's move on to test 2. Test 2 is going to build on test 1. where we created a landing page, and now we're going to create the app itself. So I'm going to ask each agent to build the app that we talked about in the landing page. I will ask them just to focus on the front end, and the prompt is going to be, I would now like you to implement the front-end functionality of this AI-powered app. Requirements: our app lives under /app. Homepage of the app has an empty state for creating your first issue. When you click create issue, a modal opens up to create a new issue. We need to be able to set a title, description, tags, an assignee, and a status, to do, in progress, or done, and then create the issue. When an issue is created, it appears on the Kanban board, which has the columns to do, in progress, or done, and a collapsible sidebar on the left, which has the following links: My Issues, To Do, In Progress, Done, and All Issues. These links should show a filtered list of the issues, and do not do any backend work for this. All issues should be saved locally in IndexedDB. If any requirement isn't well defined, make sensible choices for how you think the app should work. Now, this is a much more difficult, much more involved test than test one. So let's see if the agents can actually succeed with something as complex as this. I think this will really help pull out any minor differences that might exist between the agents. Let's copy and paste this into each of the 3 agents, and let's see what they come up with. I have to say, there's something nice about having a terminal-based agent. It's just quite natural to display code and diffs in a terminal compared to a sidebar UI. But I think it's just personal preference. There's nothing functionally better about it. I just like seeing this in a terminal. You can see that this is a much more difficult task because agents are taking quite a while generating all this code. And meanwhile, Claude Code is done, so we might as well go and see what it's done. So let's go to /app here. Okay, it looks like Cursor is done as well. I'm going to accept these changes. It's also interesting how Windsurf seems to be the slowest out of the 3 at this second test. Cool, so Windsurf is also finally done. And let's see if we go to /app here. Okay, so let's compare all 3. We have Fluxus with a collapsible sidebar. That seems to work well. The only thing that doesn't seem to work is the logo here. It kind of squishes itself. But okay, My Issues, To Do, In Progress. We obviously have no issues yet. So let's try creating one. Create your first issue. Okay, nice. This form looks pretty good. And what actually happens if we press AI here? Wow, okay, that somehow worked. I'm not sure even what LLM it's calling. We'll have a look at the code in a second, but okay, so user authentication system. Yeah, why not? Like, this just came up with a random issue. I didn't even type anything. Okay, let's go create issue. Okay, so obviously the Kanban is kind of, it doesn't work at this resolution. So let's expand this a bit. Can I drag and drop is the question. Okay, I can't seem to drag and drop. We can change this to in progress, and that does work. Okay, so it's just missing the drag and drop functionality, but other than that, I think we seem to have everything else that we asked for. Can we see the tags? Feature +2. Okay, yeah. Tags are here. Let's see My Issues. Okay, so these things don't work on the left. All right, let's look at Windsurf now. We have TaskFlow AI. This is collapsible. Okay, so we have an X instead of a collapse, which I don't think is quite as good, but instead of emoji, we have proper icons, which is, I would say, what I actually asked for. Let's go create issue. I definitely prefer the assignees and the way they're represented. It's funny that we have Alex Johnson in both of them. That's funny. Okay, we have tags and add a tag, which I think is, again, a bit better. What happens if I click AI Assist? Okay, nothing seems to happen at the moment. Let's say, okay, implement user authentication system. In fact, I'm just going to copy the prompt from here. Also, we have this markdown, which isn't being rendered. It's interesting. Okay, status. in progress, let's say tags, feature, security. I really like the tag UI that it's come up with here. What happens if I click AI assist now? Okay, it's not clear what that button does at the moment. All right, so we have more of a Kanban style look, I would say. And we have drag and drop. Nice. This was fully missing on the Claude implementation. Okay, and is this actually changing the status? Yes, it is. Nice. I'm just gonna try Cursor's version as well. So we go to create issue. There's some text visibility issues here. We once again have Alex Johnson. Claude 3.7 really likes Alex Johnson. Okay, so the visibility issues aside, let's maybe just copy the same thing for all three of them. Tags, we have feature, security, agents, status. Okay. Nice. Well, at least when it's created, the text visibility seems okay. Can we drag and drop? Yes, we can. Great. So I would say just the drag and drop makes this a more complete UI than what Claude Code came up with. Can we filter? Okay, we can filter as well. So let's say Alex Johnson here. Nice. So the filtering definitely works on Cursor's side. And what about Windsurf? We go to My Issues. Okay, and then change this to Alex Johnson. Okay, filtering works there. To do in progress and done. Okay, and all issues seem to work as well. Great, so why don't we now look at the code, because clearly all three of them did a pretty good job with the app. Like all of the requirements we set out seem to be working with some very minor issues. Claude Code, the main issue is that we can't seem to drag and drop like a Kanban board. And Cursor, I would say, has the worst issues. The first one being it's in light mode, even though my system is currently in dark mode, and it has some clear text visibility issues, which may or may not be to do with the dark mode being missing as well. Okay, so let's look at the code. So starting with Cursor here, let's go to the home page. The main thing I'm looking for is when you create an issue, does that save properly? So we have our board here. Okay, so issue card. Let's see what happens when we create the issue. Okay, so we are using IndexedDB as we asked for. And I think it seems to be using IndexedDB directly without using any kind of wrapper. I would have preferred it to have used some kind of wrapper like IDB, but looks good. So yeah, I think aside from the text visibility issues, Cursor did a really good job. Now moving on to Windsurf. Okay, so Windsurf itself is using IDB, and that should be just slightly easier to work with than the raw IndexedDB interface. We have some minor TypeScript issues here, but other than that, it did seem to have followed the requirements. So I would say Windsurf is pretty close to perfect. Like it works, it looks good, all the functionality is there, there's no dark mode issues. So well done. Okay, and finally, I'm gonna open up Claude Code's code in Cursor because Claude Code is not an editor itself, whereas these other two are. So let's go to Claude. One thing I'm noticing with Claude is that we have this issue context. It's using React's context API. That I think is a good decision. Like for a sizable app that's going to grow over time, I think this is the right choice. And we've got a database library as well. This is very interesting. So Claude Code, I think, generated an app that definitely feels more like a proper web app than just a throwaway prototype. If you look at Windsurf, everything is defined inside the page. I wouldn't say it's necessarily wrong for doing that because the app we have is pretty simple, but Claude Code has a much better base for now, what we're about to do next, which is add a backend to this whole thing. So let's move on to test 3, our final test. I'm going to ask all 3 agents to implement the backend for the app that we just created. And this is hopefully going to be the most difficult test out of them all. This will involve creating APIs and API contracts using a database, essentially keeping the front end and back end in sync. So we're building kind of a sync engine here. This should be quite a difficult task for today's LLMs. The prompt is, let's now implement the backend functionality for this app. Let's use Next.js's API layer and a local Postgres instance as our database. Assume it's running on localhost 5432. Use Prisma as our ORM and a way to define the database schema, and Zod to validate our API requests and responses. We want the following functionality. As issues are created, they're synced to the backend, but also available offline in IndexedDB. If an issue is deleted on the front end, it's deleted from the back end as well. When I reload the page, make sure the front end and back end are in sync. Do not implement authentication or sign up and login. We don't need to worry about that just yet. So as you can see, we're asking the agents to build a pretty complex app in total, and I'm very curious to see how they deal with this. So once again, I'm going to copy the prompt. So this is pretty interesting. Cursor is actually asking to connect to Postgres directly. I'm not sure where that's coming from, but let's say okay. You can see Cursor just kind of battling with linter errors and import errors and type issues. Yeah, building a backend is a bit more complicated. Meanwhile, Claude Code is still at it. And you can see how long we've been running for here. It's like almost 3 minutes. A single shot prompt. That's pretty impressive that it's still going. Okay, Claude Code is done. We did start it first, but in general, Claude Code has been slightly faster at generating code. I'm not sure why. That might just be their secret sauce, the fact that it's built by Anthropic. Maybe they have access to a slightly faster version of 3.7, not sure. Okay, so Cursor's also done. Meanwhile, Windsurf is still going, but I think it's also in the final stages of just creating a README file. So what I've had to do was to create the database in Postgres for all 3 of these apps. The agents potentially could do that via like an MCP server, but it was easy enough to just create that manually. And then I also had to generate the Prisma client and then push the migrations to the database, just so all the tables were created successfully. And once I've done that for all 3 apps, the Cursor and the Claude Code versions seem to be working. So the only one left is Windsurf, and I'm getting some IndexedDB error. So just trying to debug that right now. We have this fail to execute transaction error. So what I'm going to do is give this to Windsurf, and let's see what it does with that. Okay, so I think we have all 3 apps working. Let's quickly test them out and see what's actually happening here. So refreshing the Claude version, we have our existing issue here, and there's a sync button. So I would expect the sync to happen automatically rather than on a button press, but let's press that. So we call this sync API, which seems to sync the issues back to the backend. So that's doing what's expected. So let's see if we change the assignee and change this back to to-do. Okay, and then refresh the page. From the backend now we're getting issues, status to do, and the assignee is user1, which I think is me. Okay, so this seems to be working. So Windsurf has lost our issues. I think that happened during that IndexedDB migration that it had to do, but I'm not sure why that was necessary. So I would say that's a point against Windsurf here. Now if I press AI assist, what will this actually do? Okay, it populates the description. So that's pretty good based on this. Okay, so already encountering a problem here where create issue doesn't do anything. And in fact, oh, okay, so it did work, but I think we've created like lots of the same issue. Yeah, so I clicked the button so many times that it just duplicated this issue multiple times. Let's try another one, issue 2. Okay, and this time it just happened to work. Okay, dragging into in progress also doesn't seem to work here. So yeah, Windsurf has definitely broken a few things, but the general saving on the back end and the sync seems to work okay. So if I refresh the page, and if we look at the API here, we see the issues come back from the back end. It's just a bit annoying that it had such a beautiful functional UI before, and now it seems to have broken things. And finally, Cursor. So if we look at Cursor, The issues have synced with the backend because this is the issue we created before we even had a backend. If we say create issue, we still have this text visibility problem. Okay, so creating an issue, that seemed to work. So now if we drag it into in progress, that does work. So that's another plus for cursor. Okay, so now let's quickly look at the code. So for cursor, we have this API/issues. We have get issues, which lists the issues via Prisma, and then post, which creates an issue. That looks good. And then reading a single issue as well. Not sure if this is actually being used, but I guess we can update an issue via the put API here, and then also delete an issue. That's one thing we didn't test, so quickly let's test that. Let's delete this issue. Asked us to confirm, that's good. Let's delete all these duplicates maybe. Okay, so more issues with Windsurf here. When you press delete, I'm not sure what it's doing, but just pressing it like 10 times seems to suddenly work. Okay, and Claude Code, let's delete one of the issues. Are you sure? That's nice. Great, so that worked without any problems. Okay, quickly looking at Windsurf, let's look at the API. We have get and post, basically the same as cursor, get and put and delete. So that's good as well. Okay, so looking through Claude Code last, we have the API, issues, the same get and put. We have the sync API, which syncs issues between client and server. I am wondering how they achieved the AI assistance though. So I don't actually have like an OpenAI key or anything. So what are they doing? Okay, so very interesting. Windsurf has actually just hard-coded some AI assistance, which isn't really AI assistance. We look at Claude, we have generate with AI, and it says simulate AI completion by adding some placeholder text. Yeah, that's, you know, without setting an OpenAI key or Anthropic key, these wouldn't have worked anyway, but it would have been nice if they generated an actual LLM call to enhance the issues with real AI. And there we have it. That's all 3 tests done. And I would say all 3 agents did a really good job and much better than I expected, especially with the 3rd test that involves the backend. I would say Windsurf probably had the best UI. It followed dark mode correctly, and it also let you drag and drop issues. Everything else looked fairly presentable. In terms of code quality, Claude just had the slight edge. Claude Code used React contexts, whereas the other 2 didn't. And that made it a little bit easier to organize the front end, I think. And Claude also separated the context code and put them in a library, making them easier to modify and extend later. I also noticed similar things with the backend as well. I think Cursor did really well in general, and the backend worked well, the synchronization worked well. It had drag and drop, whereas Claude Code didn't. The thing that let Cursor down really was the UI. There were some massive text visibility issues. It's hard to know how much of it was down to Cursor and how much of it was down to the underlying LLM. Okay, so if we were to somehow crown a winner out of this test, it's hard to crown a single winner, so I'm going to crown 2 winners here. The first category is going to be in code quality. That I'm going to give to Claude Code. I think it just had a slight edge in the quality of code it generated. The second category is going to be in terms of the overall UI, and that I'm going to give to Windsurf, because Windsurf was the only one that used real icons. It's the only one that supported drag and drop, AI generation, tagging, and all of that stuff just looked slightly better than Claude Code. And unfortunately, Cursor doesn't get a crown here because I just think in every category it was trailing either Claude Code or Windsurf. And that is it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed these 3 tests and seeing how far agents have come, the fact that they can execute a pretty complex app in a single prompt, and all 3 agents I think did a really good job at that. Please do give the video a like if you enjoyed it, and do consider subscribing to my channel and checking out my other videos about AI and using agents. Once again, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.